everybody. I am Olivia Roberts, and today I will be interviewing E.K. Johnston and Cheryl Isaacs about their books from the Forest of Reading White Pine list for 2025. Would you guys like to go ahead and introduce yourselves?
Sure. My name is E.K. Johnston, and my White Pine book is Titan of the Stars. This is, I've lost count. It's like my several return to Forest of Reading. I'm super excited about it, and also very excited about this interview.
Hi, I'm Cheryl Isaacs. I'm the author of The Unfinished, My White Pine, my first White Pine, which I'm very excited about. Thank you. It's a creepy little story that I look forward to sharing with everybody and getting into your nightmares.
All right. Okay, let's jump right into it. Um, EK, you can go first. How long have you wanted to write this book or a story like this? Has it
Oh,
been?
this one's kind of weird because it's what's called a packaged IP. So the packaging company actually came to me and was like, "Do you want to write this book?" And then I had to like audition for it a little bit. And then they, were like, "Yes, we like all these changes you made." And then we started trying to sell it to a publisher. So I've kind of wanted to write it almost exactly as long as I have been writing it, which is unusual for me. But the whole thing started in, I guess, 2023 when I started when I got the offer and then when I started working on the book.
That's very cool. Cheryl?
That is very cool. Wow, I don't know if I could do that. Um, this book I wrote for myself. I just wrote it over the course of one summer. I would go out every morning, go for a run, come back, write the next part of the story, and I actually never had any ambition to publish it, but got pushed and encouraged to do something with it. And so that turned out to be my debut book. But it
Cool.
was just kind of, yeah.
Yeah, that's a very cool and like very interesting way to go about it. Both of you, very
You couldn't
cool.
have gotten more opposite answers if you tried.
Yeah, it is, but it's cool to have the blend of the experienced and the new to I think it's very interesting. Oh, I wanted to kind of start off with this kind of way. Both of your novels had main characters who called Canada like home, either from space or actually in Canada. Um, but why was this an important detail for you to include in the story? EK, do you want to go first, Dan?
Sure. For me, it's that I always do that. Basically, whenever I have a book that's set in the real world or some variation of the near real world, I always set it in Canada. Because at the beginning it was kind of like a challenge, like, can I get away with this? Because at the time Eric Walters wasn't setting books in Canada. Like he had a book that was very obviously set in Toronto that they like changed to generic American city. And I was like, no, we're gonna set these books in Canada, and my editors have always been really supportive of that. And this book was actually published by Penguin Canada, so it was a much easier fight than usual to set it in Canada. So that's why I always do it, just to remind them we're here.
That's cool. Cheryl?
I think they do need to be reminded that we're here. Yeah. Um, yeah, The Unfinished is set in Ontario. It's not explicitly Canada, but my next book starts in Toronto and then moves to Northern Ontario. And I did get some pushback because Avery is a runner and everything is in kilometers, and they wanted me to change it to miles, and I'm like, I don't know what that would feel like. Like, how fast would she be going? I don't know how far 5 miles is. And they let me keep that. But yeah, it was even a fight to get that, just to get the measurements. But um, I think Canada deserves to be represented, and everyone deserves to see themselves represented on the shelves in whatever way that is. And Canadian kids deserve to see Canadian kids in books. So
Yeah. I was very happy to see that, especially because that's a big part of why this committee and program exists. So it
yeah.
was very fun to see um, books by Canadian authors set in Canada. Um, oh, yes. Both of your books seem to have strong ties to like something that either you previously experienced or something in the real world. At least when I read it, that's I felt familiar, like it felt that it was familiar to another story. Um, EK, I thought yours was really similar to the Titanic. Maybe it was just because it was called Titan and Titanic might be too close for me, but I wanted to hear what you thought about that.
Well, I mentioned earlier that it was a packaged book that they came to me
Yes.
with the idea, and the idea was, could you please write the Titanic and like mix it up with aliens and put it in
Oh,
space?
that's cool. Yeah.
So the Sigourney Weaver movie and the tragic loss at sea of the actual Titanic. Although both of those movies are James Cameron, which I think is kind of interesting because that's another Canadian angle. Anyway, so I didn't really use the movie Titanic that much. There's one thing in the movie Titanic that made it into the book, but everything else is just the actual ship. And then the Alien movies, which I haven't seen because I'm a chicken, but I've watched enough clips that I could like get the gist of what was going on.
You've never seen them?
I can't handle
The gore,
yeah,
the bursting.
yeah. Despite what I wrote, I can't actually watch it.
I would never have got you did an amazing job. I would have thought this was written by a diehard fan. Okay. Wow. Wow, that's pretty impressive.
Um, Cheryl, I wanted to ask if you'd ever been lost in a forest yourself, because it seems like you're pretty good at describing that.
Well, I haven't ever been lost in the forest, but um, I'm also a runner and I run exclusively in the forest because road running is just not, that's like the treadmill, it's boring. So I've never been lost in the forest, but definitely when I get to the start of the trail and there's lots of walkers and cyclists and people that it's really irritating. But on a long run, when I get really deep into the trail and deeper into the forest, there's always a moment where I look around and I realize, like there are no people here. And then a moment of, oh, there are no people here. And it's not scary exactly, but it makes me feel very small to be surrounded by so many trees and realize that I'm not really on human territory anymore. So not lost, but maybe not at home exactly. Yeah.
Okay, that was a very cool answer. I like that as well. Um, so I'm not much of a horror reader myself, so when I got assigned this panel, I was kind of worried that I wasn't going to be able to make it through the books. I
Valid.
was, um, but I did, obviously. And I wanted to know how you guys balanced the horror and the like terrifying part with storytelling and still making it a captivating, interesting story for readers. So, yeah.
I was
So,
actually kind of surprised that my book was going to be marketed as horror because to me, it's just, it's definitely creepy, eerie, spooky, but I don't particularly consider it horror. But um, I think as long as the horror aspects are a necessary part of the story that you're telling, then it kind of just falls into place. Like sometimes you're asked to amp up something that's already there, and that's no problem. I can do that because that thing belongs in the story and I have to have it. But if someone asked me to add something that wasn't there before, then it makes me a little nervous because if it's something that can be taken out or put back in and it doesn't really affect the story very much, then to the reader, it's going to feel tacked on or added on and unnecessary. So to me, I just kind of try to make sure that it's necessary, it's part of the story that I'm telling, like it's a part of the plot or it's functions like one of the characters. I need it and it just becomes part of the narrative.
For me, it was looking at Canadian horror and what makes it a little bit distinct from other countries in the way they write horror novels, and sort of taking the elements of Canadian horror, like the isolation, the cold, the exposure, that kind of thing, all of which or mostly, like when we talk about it normally, we're talking about winter, but it also works quite well for space. So it was kind of pretty straightforward to do that. I didn't envision it as a horror novel originally either. When we were talking about it in development with the editor, he was like, I really want to do like a space horror. Can we do a space horror? And I was like, sure, I guess. We'll see what happens. So I wrote the first book or the first draft, and then one of the like major editorial notes was like more tentacles going into revisions, so we added more tentacles. But I was convinced it wasn't scary because I know where all the jump scares are, right? Like it's a very jump scare book, and I know where they all are, so it's not scary for me anymore. So when people started telling me that there was like deeply upsetting, I was like, oh good. I really didn't think that it was.
Follow-up question. Do you guys think you'll write another horror book after you had much success with this one? Or is this a
But I just
one?
did.
Yeah. Oh, you did?
Yeah, I wrote the sequel. I'm not sure if that counts or not, but maybe. I don't know. Sometimes things just turn horror because your editor is afraid of it, or you're afraid of it, or like you uncover something and you're like, oops. Um, so yeah, I kind of decide the genre very close to the end of the writing process.
Okay, that's an interesting way to do it. Cheryl?
Yeah, I already did. Uh, two more. Um, I don't know. I think everything I write will always have maybe a little bit of darkness, maybe not horror, but darkness just because, for better or worse, that's how I see the world, maybe. I don't know. That just probably says something about me, like a lot about me. Um, but yeah, I like the little slivers where what we recognize as reality and something else kind of overlap. I like those little spaces that most people find creepy. So I'm just built different, I guess.
All right. Oh, once when I attended a lecture at the Forest Reading Festival a couple of years ago now, I think, they spoke about being either a plotter or a pantser, in terms of when you're writing a new book. I was wondering, like, if you guys would know which one you are.
So I was a pantser by nature when I started out, and when my schedule started filling up and I started to do more IP projects, I had to do outlines because when a franchise hires you, they want to know what you're doing before you sign contracts and stuff. I don't enjoy it. I'd much rather make it up as I go along. So the way that I usually describe it is the flashlight method, which is that I'm going on a hike at night, which obviously don't do that. The hike is metaphorical, and you look at the trail map when you're in the parking lot, so you have a rough idea of where you're going, but then for the rest of the hike, you can only see what your flashlight is showing. So that's my preferred way of doing it. I know where I'm going generally, but I can only see as far as the flashlight is. And if there's an earthquake, we will handle it when we get there.
I'm very, very similar. The Unfinished was completely pantsed, which I will never do to myself again, ever. Because like Kate, it's really enjoyable to write that way. It's really fun. But when you are publishing and you get to the revision stage, it's just nothing but pain. And so now I start out by writing like a synopsis, even though my synopses are terrible and I suck at it. But I need some kind of a map to prevent just like, yeah, wandering off into the forest completely and not being able to find my way back, having my editor pull me back in. So I'm a pantser in my heart, but I have to have elements of a plotter, even though I don't like it.
Yeah.
It's not fun.
Funny.
We do what we have to do.
Yes.
Okay. I have some questions for like specifics. So Cheryl, I'm gonna ask you one now, just for you. So I'm a runner as well, and I was pretty scared when I realized that your story was about a runner. It actually, like, I was like, I don't know if I can read this. Um, did you expect to like connect with runners through the book, or was that just
Um, I made Avery a runner for a couple of reasons. One being that, like, obviously that's what I know, and even though she's not me and I'm not her, um, I'm not really into like doing a whole lot of research. And like I said, originally this story was just for me. But um, I think runners are, we have some good qualities. Like we tend to be very focused and very determined. So when you're out on a run and you have a certain mileage that you want to get, even if it starts raining or your back starts hurting or your shoes are, not great, you keep going. And those can be really positive traits and they can help you in life, but they can also be very negative. In like Avery's case, where she has the determination to keep going, but it's in the wrong direction. She's determined to do things by herself and not get help from anyone and not ask anyone for anything. And she's too focused on things that are actually holding her back. So I wanted to use her being a runner as having these qualities that could help her, but at the time that we meet her, she's using in kind of a negative way. So to all the runners, I'm very sorry. You're not bad people, but it was a good way to talk about the things that are um, not going super well in her life when we meet her.
That's very interesting. I was kind of curious about that one. EK, I kind of have a follow-up question about representation again. So I really enjoyed that your book talked about something that was actually significant to the rest of the world that happened in Canada. Um, so I wanted to like see what you were more determined if you had anything to add on from what you said before, because I don't know, I
Well,
found it very refreshing.
with this book specifically, I wanted to make sure that nobody could be like, could you not set this book in Canada? I wanted to like bake it right in. And I also needed a reason for the characters to be connected to each other. Originally, it was just like one of them is poor, one of them is rich, but I wanted them to have another layer of connection. And I was like, you know what we should do? Have a natural disaster. And I must have seen something like there had been like an earthquake or something, because that plot line's real, it turns out. And there's nothing we can do about it because of the kind of fault line it is. So when it goes, it's just gonna go and that will be it. There's nothing, and like, there's no preparedness that we can do. It's all response. So I was like, yeah, I could see how that would be an issue. But I wanted to incorporate it anyway because I wanted, as I said, to give those characters the base to work from. And then I always just try to make everything as Canadian as possible because it's more fun that way. And I can write about the places and the people that I like, or in some cases don't like, and sort of put that into the books. It helps me be more genuine when I'm putting things together.
Thank you for that. That's again very exciting to have Canadian representation. Cheryl, what did it feel like to hear that your book was made this list and was so successful?
I was really excited actually because I have personal experience with white pine from the other side of it. Um, And it's a little bit different than getting on other lists. Like it's because I know it's about students engaging with it and discussing with it over the period of the year, rather than just an organization kind of putting their stamp and saying, yes, we recognize this. This is like, to me, feels more meaningful. So, the Americans that I work with, they're like, they don't get it. I'm like, no, 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 it's white pine. They're like, what is that? I'm like, no. But yeah, to me, it's like the best thing that's happened with this book. Absolutely.
Yes, we're very happy to have you. Looking back on, I think one of yeah, EK. Looking back on some of the books you've made before, at least some of the ones I've read that have made the list before, this seemed to be in like a different style, just even past the horror. What kind of pushed you, or was this just because of your uh, it coming from the editor and it was more of like a already pre-designed book?
I think it was kind of both. It's always a little bit weird when you don't come up with the characters yourself. and then it just means that you kind of put more into the surrounding characters, which makes the vibe a little different. I think otherwise, I've just changed a lot. I think my first nomination was all the way back in 2014. So it was, my first book, it was, this fantasy, it took place in Canada that sucked slightly less than the one in Titan of the Stars. And we kind of had all of that. And then I've always been a kind of person who jumps from genre to genre. Like this is my fifth Forest of Reading nomination, and they've all been kind of different genres at this point. So it's kind of fun for me to sort of switch it up that way. I think the main difference is that between um, A Thousand Nights and Titan of the Stars, I wrote five Star Wars books, and so that sort of changed how I write sci-fi a little bit, streamlined it, sort of made me, decide what battles I want to pick with an editor before I get into the actual arguments, and sort of how those things go together. So I don't think it was necessarily like hugely different, except my books don't usually have that high of a body count. Usually my books can be described as a hug, not so much, or not the right kind of hug anyway, with Titan of the Stars.
Well, there's something to aspire to with the next one.
Yeah.
Higher body count.
Oh, yeah, there is. Sorry. Spoilers.
So, um, just before I think we're almost done here, so I wanted to get this one in. Where are you looking to go next on your writing journey? This is one for both of you. So one of you can go first.
Well, I guess I have the sequel, so that's the easy answer. That comes out in September. Yeah, September. But I also have some middle grade books coming out. I've never written middle grade before. That one comes out in August, and it's about like sports magic and family and a little bit of necromancy. And I'm very excited about it. Aside from that, I'm kind of looking forward to getting back to fantasy a little bit. I've written some sci-fi, I've written some contemporary, I've written some science fantasy, but I'm really looking forward to getting back to like being mad at horses for how inefficient they are instead of like lying about spacecraft because I don't know how they work.
Horses are inefficient. Yeah. So I had the sequel to The Unfinished come out this fall. And then my next book is also horror. I'm sorry. Um, I couldn't help it though. It's very different. I think it's actually a little bit darker than this one, but like EK said before, when you write different books, you're a slightly different person than you were when you wrote the last book, and you think slightly differently about things. Um, but yeah, I would like to try another genre. I had a short story in an anthology, a romantasy anthology, which I'd never written before, so I'd like to try out some other genres and see what's fun, or maybe different age groups, maybe a picture book. I don't know.
And who inspired you to write this book? Like, is there anyone you want to give a shout out to or anything like that?
As I said, the inspiration question is always a little bit weird for me on this one. I was inspired by my mortgage. Um, but as I said, it was kind of a little bit scary. Sometimes when you do these IP books, you hear horror stories of authors who are working with people who won't let them make any changes or who are just like really difficult to edit with. And working with Inked Entertainment on this book was just great. I basically went in with like a list of 14 things I wanted to change, and every single time I said one of them, they were like, oh, but then this could happen. I was like, that is literally my next point. So like we're having like the same thought waves. And then I said the last thing that I was changing about Titan of the Stars, which was the ending, and they were like, so now it's a 2-book deal. And I'm like, yes, it is in fact a 2-book deal. So I think that to me was very inspiring. It's a different kind of inspiration, but it was a nice collaboration. You don't get to collaborate that much when you're a writer. It's a lot of like alone time. But building this story with somebody else is pretty cool.
Yeah, I think because this was my book, I'd have to like shout out my editor, because I think she just gave me the best possible experience for a debut. She was really really supportive and very few arguments, which now, having published other books, I've learned is, a little more common. So yeah, I really appreciate her even more. Um, but it's like Kiki said, it's a very, writing is solitary, but publishing is very collaborative, and sometimes it's easier than others. And for the unfinished, it was very, very easy. So shout out to Rosemary.
All right. So, okay. I think I'm gonna go next with just a very similar question. What were like the main challenges that you kind of got through? How did you get through them? What made them stand out to you? What have you learned in process of writing this book? That kind of thing.
For me, Titan was my burnout book.
Oh no.
It was my fifth first draft in I think 10 months. It was a nightmare. I never want to do that again. It was just so many first drafts. And like while I was drafting this book, I had two other books go through their entire publication cycles. Like they were printed by the time I was done drafting this book. So I was just exhausted. And that makes it really hard to work on anything, including like whatever your next book is. And so I wasn't particularly in a great place mentally at that point. But fortunately, I have a really great doctor. So I was able to talk to her about it. And she was like, okay, we're going to fix this. And so we were able to kind of put that together and, it's never going to be entirely turned around because writing is so much in your head and so much in your emotions. But last year I wrote three books or three drafts, like three first drafts. And, I didn't hate myself or them that's not true. I hated myself and the book for the first one, but then I saw my doctor, and then the second two, I didn't hate myself or the book at all. So I think that was important. And the thing that makes that extra amazing is that the book that I didn't hate myself or the book for was the sequel, which I was writing while Titan was being published. So like nobody has that optimistic of a second book story ever. And I was like, this is great. I've never felt this great about a book in like years. And it's the second book, and I'm in the middle of promo for the first one. So it should have been a nightmare, and instead it was actually pretty good. So that was nice.
Wow. Wow. You are a trooper. Holy moly. I can't imagine. My brain could never. No.
But
Um,
that's why I have to outline now.
this is why you need the flashlight. Yes, this is why. Yeah. I think for me, the challenge was just like I said, that I pants the first draft of this book, and then I had to go back and fix everything and get used to just the business of publishing that I didn't know anything about, and how much was going to change against my will sometimes. But yeah, it was just different. It was just a learning process, basically. And I came out wiser and more cynical, but I know what I'm doing now.
Okay. So I think we'll wrap up now, but I'm gonna ask one more question for each of you. Um, Cheryl, I just wanted to ask about developing characters because I felt that not only your main character was very relatable, but all of your characters seemed to have a lot of different emotions and a lot of thought put into them. So,
I always have very unsatisfying answers to this question because, like being a pantser, I am not someone who crafts characters. I don't write like character outlines. Um, they are usually pretty solid people when I meet them in my head. I know what they look like, what they sound like, and the way they speak and the choices they make. So I don't have great answers. My ideas just usually come from like an image, and then the story is kind of there, and I try to write it down really quickly before it runs away. But the characters are people that live in my head, and yeah, so I can't take a lot of credit for that. The little part of my brain that works on this without telling me um, is responsible. I'm just along for the ride.
funny. I like that you guys both have a similar story writing method, but seem I don't know. I don't know how it works, but it's very good results. Good
Sometimes
results.
we don't know how it works either,
Yeah,
but as
yeah.
long as it does.
Um, and EK, um, so what inspired you to like make this into a two book, three book, like continue with this
With the
the
series.
Titan of the Stars, the series, yes,
Yeah.
sorry.
Um, honestly, I think the original ending that they sent me, I was like, I don't know how I feel about this. And then I thought about it. I moved some characters around. I changed some plot elements, and then I was like, okay, I'm just gonna like shoot for the moon on this, because as I said before, like sometimes they really don't like you changing stuff in IP books. But I went through and I did my outline, and then I got to that last point, and I was like, this is what I want for the ending. And then Inked Entertainment was like, that's two books. I'm like, it is in fact two books. I'm pretty sure I know what happens in the second one. Well, I know what happens at the end of the second one anyway. I don't know what happens in the middle. Or at the first, I don't know, 65,000 words. And then so that was kind of how that came from, was this idea of taking an idea and working with someone and sort of building it up from that. And then the really like practical, depressing bean counting answer is a two-book deal is always better than a one-book deal because you get paid more. And you have that sort of security of knowing you have a book next year and a book the year after that. So that part is also pretty good. So I do try to do two-book deals whenever I can. Usually I find the sequel like halfway through writing the first one. It's very unusual for me to find it beforehand. But it was kind of nice to kind of know where I was going. Mostly because every time someone's like, "Oh, I can't believe you didn't kill Adam," I can be like, "I know, I know, it's almost like I have a plan for that."
Okay, I think we'll wrap up here. So, last thing I wanted to say or ask you guys was about um, what you're looking forward to for Forest of Reading, any upcoming things, festival. Yeah.
I'm really excited to have some school visits. I haven't had school visits since like 2019. So I'm pretty pumped to sort of get back and talking to readers and classes and all that kind of stuff because I do miss it. I live like far enough out into the boonies now that it's not always super practical. But I've had a few people reach out and made some organizing, so I'm pretty pumped about that.
Yeah, same. I'm excited to do school visits and talk to people who are actually like reading the book and thinking about the book and just see what other books they're reading and what they're interested in. Um, yeah, it's always nice to talk to readers,
Especially teenage ones.
especially teenage ones. Yes, yes.
Okay, so I think that will conclude everything we've got to cover today. It was a pleasure to meet you both. I really enjoyed this conversation. Yeah, so
Thank
thank
you
you.
very much.
Well, it was great to talk to you.
Bye.